The next to last episode of WandaVision dropped this morning. I just checked it out. It provided a bunch of answers and raised a few more questions. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. What did you think about this week's episode of WandaVision, and what are you expecting for next week? This is a spoiler review, so feel free to spoil down below in the comment section. No spoiler warnings are required. Also, if you want to know how this video is going to work, basically I'm going to give my quick kind of review of the episode and then walk through the whole thing, kind of give you my thoughts. You can skip ahead to whatever you want down below on those little chapter markers right down there. And if you're newer to my channel and don't know, I've done an enormous amount of MCU content. I've ranked the movies, the heroes, the villains, all that fun stuff. If you want more MCU content from me, check out this playlist right up here, and let's get started with my general thoughts and review. And honestly, I'm not quite sure where I fall on this episode just yet. One of the things that makes this show so tricky is that every episode is so different, or almost every episode is so different from every other episode. So you have obviously the full-blown sitcom episodes at the beginning that had just a little pinch of the Twilight Zone in there, and then you had episode 4 that was 100% exposition. Let's catch you up on what was going on the outside. And then you had a few of these kind of side-by-side episodes where it was both sitcom with kind of external world. And then this one is kind of something different. It's a bit like episode 4, and it's, exposition heavy. Let's give some backstory context for some things, but in a totally different way. It's all character backstory. It's all developing them and helping us understand who they are. So, we get, of course, kick off with a scene about Agatha, giving us a little bit of context for who she is. But then this episode is very much, let's walk through the trauma of her life, Wanda's life. And so in the context of the rest of the show, it's very different. It's much darker. There's been dark moments, but this whole episode was just saturated in tragedy, drama, and so even interpreting how I feel about it, I'm not quite sure. It has some amazing moments of acting from Elizabeth Olsen, some great moments between Wanda and Vision. For being such an odd couple, which is almost the premise of the show, they have such amazing chemistry in all of the different contexts they've put them in. They've been able to pull it off so well and be so good at it. And then in this one, you get a few more of those glimpses of the real interactions between their two of their characters. And they can be incredibly powerful moments. And then we see Wanda's reaction to so many of these events that kind of happened in her life that shaped her into who she is when it comes to the show. And at the same time, it's an episode that essentially is just saying information. Doesn't move the plot forward much, hardly at all. It's just, okay, all that stuff you kind of already knew about what was going on here, about Wanda's past, her trauma leading to all this. Let's just go and look at it and give you just a little bit more information as we do that. So it's an exposition episode, and it's telling us some things we didn't know about Wanda, filling in some gaps, but it feels once again like now that we're 8 episodes into it, and you can kind of see, okay, we know what the full story is. We know there's just one episode left, and it starts to feel a little bit more like, okay, they had this much story, but they're taking this long to tell it. It's feeling a lot more like that right now, where it seemed with episodes 4, 5, 6 for a little bit, they're like, oh, big stuff, man, we got 4 more episodes, we got 3 more episodes, and they're supposed to be longer episodes, man, I can't wait to see what's going to happen. And then last week, it felt like the whole episode existed just so we could have the Agatha reveal. And then this episode exists just so we can give a little bit of important details about kind of what's going on with Wanda, answer a couple questions, but then just kind of a character episode. It feels like we are kind of stretching things out a little bit. So I'm not sure how I'm going to feel about this episode when I see the whole context to everything? Will it be this important piece that helps us understand the character so much better and fills in the gaps? Or when you get to the end of it, it's like, does it feel somewhat like we're taking a little bit too long to tell our story? Along those same lines, some of the answers given, they felt a bit too direct, too obvious. Obviously, we have our fan theory games that we've been doing this all along, where we've been speculating about what could be going on. And some of what we're saying is just way too complex and convoluted with these paths about how everything will come together. We're going to pull this together, and Reed Richards is going to show up. Magneto is going to float above. We've had all kinds of crazy ideas. And then there's kind of the more simple, most direct version of it. Someone named Agnes shows up, probably Agatha. And Wanda is clearly controlling reality. And then we get our answers, and Agnes is Agatha, and Wanda is controlling everything. It's just like, yeah, it was the obvious answer. It wasn't a big reveal. It was just, yeah, that's what we thought. Yeah, she watched sitcoms growing up. Okay. And so it just feels more simplistic than had, with all these kind of big moving pieces and possibilities of what this could mean and that could mean. And there were layers to it, but then we get the final answer and it feels like it's the most straightforward version of it. It doesn't have the layers actually with the actual full answer. So like, okay, it's not bad. It doesn't really hurt the show, but it does feel a little bit underwhelming compared to what could have been here, the possibilities. And once again, part of what makes this show to evaluate as you're going through it is so much of it is built upon the answers, the final answers, because the whole show is about raising questions, and how good it is depends on the answers that are provided. So we've gotten a lot of answers at this point in time, but we don't have all the answers. So I don't know. It with some of the answers given, I felt a little bit like, okay, that feels a bit simple in light of potentially what could have been, while at the same time making Wanda feel very much like this tragic character. Of course, Elizabeth Olsen is great. So Olsen is great as a character. So just a lot of kind of mixed feelings on it. Nothing actually bad. Nothing in the bad category. Don't misread what I'm saying. But felt like maybe it could be like way up here, and it was like, just okay, that was good. That was good enough. And whenever you come below what you're expecting or what could have been, the inherent feeling you get from that is disappointment because it fell below the expectation. So take that as you will. Potentially by next week when we get all the answers, I'll have a very different feeling about all of this. And let's move on to our episode walkthrough. And our episode kicks off, and we are in Salem, Massachusetts, and it turns out Agatha has been around a long time and is rather old and was not popular with her fellow witches. So apparently she was learning some magic above her pay grade. The rest of the witches were like, not supposed to do that. So she's surrounded, tied to a stake, and they're all trying to hold her in place. And her mother is kind of the person presiding over this whole thing. And she's like, I didn't do that. I didn't do it. And she keeps saying she didn't do it. And the mother's like, no, yes, you did. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. You've been lying. It's all about deception with you. And eventually she kind of confesses to it. So they start using their Harry Potter wands to shoot rays at her to take her out. And at first it seems like they're hurting her. And then the beam starts stretching back at them and the color changes till it gets all the way back to them and blasts into their wands. And they like shrivel up and die in a way that whether she sucked out their energy, shot their energy back to them, like they wither up and die. And the way they kind of look, it's reminiscent of the guy on the island in the commercial from 2 weeks ago that withered up and something was offered to him and he takes it and he can't open it. His Yo Magic or whatever, can't open it up. And so he kind of withers up. Has that kind of that look to it. So I don't know if that means anything, if there's any reference there. Some similarities in the look. Her mother's still floating there. And, she's like, I can be good. I can be good. And her mother's like, no, you can't. So her mother tries to zap her and take her out. And once again, Beam goes back into it and she takes out her whole own mother, kind of giving us our backstory for her that she's apparently trying to learn magic. She's not supposed to know. She wants to keep knowing more, and even is willing to kill her own mother. Granted, her mother was trying to kill her, so you can't blame her too much on that one, but there may be some pulling of energy from people or something like that. That's some of the speculation that what's going on here is that she's trying to take Wanda's power, since Wanda is rather powerful, which we'll talk about further in this video about this episode. So then we pick up where last week left off. We are in the basement, and essentially the rest of the episode is Agatha talking to Wanda, giving Wanda answers, and then giving us some answers, and kind of going through her backstory. Once again, an exposition episode, but in a character sort of direction. And so we start going into this, and Wanda is not happy about this. She wants to get to her kids, so she's trying to use magic, and nothing is happening. And so Agatha's like, yeah, I've got these runes up here, and I've cast this deal, and only the person who's put up the runes can use the magic. And as you look at them, I believe one of them is like the symbol for Mephisto, and there's all these different symbols that I'm sure mean things that I don't fully know, but Wanda can't do anything. Agatha has got her under her control and kind of has her tied up down in the basement. And basically what she says is she's been trying to get Wanda to reveal her true identity. She's been trying to get her to really show who she is and what she can do. And then she says, you almost did it with fake Pietro. So that's been the speculation all kind of since that episode, that he's not the real guy. He's a fake. There was, whether it was going to be he was a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent that was converted or something like that, then because of his behavior a couple weeks back, it was like, I don't think this is the real one. I think this is something different's going on here. And the way that he was saying stuff to try and pull answers out of her and promote what she's doing didn't seem like something her brother would actually say. And then during the Agatha All Along song, you see she's behind it, doing magic stuff to make him say stuff. So basically it's revealed that he's just some guy, and Agatha's like, yeah, the real body's on the other side of the world, holes in it, couldn't do that, so I had to do my little recast here. And it just feels like a pretty disappointing answer to eventually give us on this one. Of all the directions you could go with it, answers that could be given, like, no, he's just a random guy pretending to be your brother that happens to look like the guy from the Fox universe. So all it is a little wink at the audience. It's not really multiverse. As soon as you do that, and we know that there's multiverse of madness coming, we're pretty sure Spider-Verse is coming, and then you have Fox universe guys show up. We're not just being overly active fans. We're not just being overly excitable, coming up with crazy theories. Some of our theories are crazy. Some of us are. Some of what we have been doing has been that. But when you put a character from the Fox universe in the show, when we know you're going multiverse, because you announced that as a title of a movie and told us Wanda is in it, we're just seeing the pattern. We're just putting things together. So then when you go, no, there's no connection. It doesn't mean anything. And maybe next week it'll be clarified and it does mean something. Maybe like, okay, maybe something will come of this, that there will be more connective tissue. But the implication of this episode, there's no connective tissue. It's hard to not feel kind of let down by that. Like, oh, okay. Well, you tricked us by teasing something that doesn't have any ties to the universe. You used our external knowledge of other things against us in this show in a way that there's no connective tissue, the reason it was fun and clever is because you knew we would do connective tissue and tie it all together. That's frustrating. Maybe one of the reasons also why the episode had certain ways in which it let me down is there's a couple of these things where it's like, you tricked me, but not in a way that's satisfying. Not in a way that felt like you were smarter than me. In a way that just felt like you tricked me. Likewise, my theory about who the big cameo would be that they keep alluding to, and they say, oh, no one's guessed it yet. the one that made the most sense to me with Michael Fassbender as Magneto in the comics. Magneto, Scarlet Witch's dad. So obviously he's the dad in the X-Men universe. So there's reason to do that would kind of maybe resolve some of her emotional issues. Now we make it clear, like, no, that's not why Pietro he's not from the Fox universe. Is just she had to make someone up and they wanted to wink at the audience a little bit. So right there was like, okay, Fassbender's probably not on the table. And then later in the episode, we'll get another reason that's probably not on the table. But so anyway, a little bit disappointed by that kind of reveal because it just meant that it didn't mean anything. They did something that clearly would imply it meant something. And it didn't mean anything at all. And then Agatha says a great line. She says, you're so crippled by your own self-doubt that you believed it. Which to an extent seems like a theme we're getting post-Endgame. What's the whole plot line of Far From Home? People are so desperate for heroes that they'll believe anything. And then what do we get is said to Wanda? Crippled by your self-doubt that you'll believe anything. So both Agatha and Mysterio having very similar observations about the world around them and kind of what's going on. And I don't know if that's going to tie into something, but it is interesting. So then Agatha keeps kind of talking, and it kind of introduces the big idea of the episode that Wanda's always been a witch. She's always been special. Something just amplified it. Now, of course, we know what it is, and the thing that amplified it, we thought is what gave her powers, but apparently she starts implying that she's had it since longer than that and before that. And then Agatha says, hey, I could do these little illusions, and it took me forever to learn how to do this small little thing that's right here. But Wanda, you created a TV show with plot lines, characters on autopilot that went for miles. How did you do that? Very interesting and very important because the whole time we've been trying to figure out how is Wanda doing this? Is someone else controlling her? What's kind of going on with these people outside the city? Like how do all these pieces work? And then last week we learned from the song, it was Agatha all along, but now we're learning Agatha was there all along. She was trying to make it go bad all along. But Agatha's saying, Wanda, you did this. You're the one with the power to create all of this, and can do magic. I can create some stuff, but you created a town that runs on its own while still doing your own thing. That's incredible magic. And so that raises the question, like, how is she able to do this and make all of this happen? So then Agatha plucks one of her hairs out, wants to go down memory lane with her. Wanda is less excited about this plan, and so she's going to, like, fight back against her. And then Agatha's like, I got your kids. And Wanda's like, okay, I guess I'll do what you'll say. And then we start down memory lane, which brings us to her childhood in Sokovia. And basically we see the apartment where she was raised with her brother and her two parents. In this moment in time, I was like, could this be our appearance of Michael Fassbender as her father? And then this other guy walks up. What is an actor that I've seen in stuff before. He's one of those faces, but I don't know the guy's name. But it's not at all Michael Fassbender whatsoever. So my theory that eventually we'd have him as the dad, and it would tie it all together, give her emotional payoff, give us our cameo, tie in the No, two different ways they shot down my theory of both the Pietro that was fake, didn't mean anything, and then here's the dad, and he does not look like Michael Fassbender. And what we learn is, like, it is a full-blown war zone outside. And we knew that when they did the Halloween episode, they showed stuff, and there's gunshots in the background, and we knew that just from other things about the MCU. But here, I mean, like, they look out the window, and, I mean, full-blown war zone. So they do TV night and they pick a sitcom. They've got a box full of DVDs, VHS tapes of old sitcoms that are all the sitcoms that these TV shows or episodes have been based off of. And so then they sit down to watch them as their escape from the reality of what's going on the outside. Theme of the show. So her dad asks, what's your favorite? Picks out Dick Van Dyke Show. And they put it on and they start watching it. And just she has a big grin on her face while explosions, gunshots are going on outside. And while they're watching it, big explosion happens in their house that kills her parents. And her and Pietro are like hiding underneath a table, just trying to stay alive. And there's still even the TV's playing Dick Van Dyke Show just a little bit. It's flickering. And then the Stark bomb lands right in front of them. And it's beeping like the toaster from the very first episode. And sitting there staring at it, and she kind of raises her hand and starts doing the Grogu magic hand trick towards it. And then it cuts to the outside where Agatha's like, and you put a hex on the bomb to keep yourself safe. And kind of putting this idea out there that she's always had powers. She's always had the ability to do stuff. Something amplified it. And Wanda's like, no, that's not what happened. We were there for 2 days, kept us safe, and the bomb didn't go off. Like, right, because you did the magic hand trick, stopped the bomb from exploding. And Agatha keeps saying, so you're a baby witch all along. But what gave you the power to do all of this? Kind of continue. We know what the answer is, but continuing to kind of build this theme of kind of what's going on. And Agatha starts to taunt her like, okay, your parents died, so you decided to join a terrorist organization. It's like, well, we wanted to change the world, but yeah, I joined a terrorist organization. Which brings us to our next stop on memory lane. And we see her as teenager or 20-something. I guess it would be 20-something. She's in the HYDRA base, and there's two scientists guy outside the room being like, hey, Wanda, volunteer. And Wanda's like, I'm a volunteer. Walk forward and touch the scepter. In the room is Loki's scepter. She's walking towards it willingly. She's saying she's volunteering. And one guy, scientist guy in the other room says to the other, hey, hasn't this killed everyone else? And like, let's do it anyway. So she walks in and doesn't even have to walk up to it. She just kind of uses her mind or whatever. Stone pops out, flies up to her, and then it like starts... You see her like flying into it, artistic shot of big glowing, her silhouetted out, and then I guess her absorbing Infinity Stone powers, and then you see her kind of plop down on the ground. And they're like, let's take her and put her in isolation. So they take her, put her in isolation. She starts watching the Brady Bunch, her escape from reality, watching TV shows. Scientist guy go in the other room. And they're like watching the tape of what happened. And on the broadcast, the video that it recorded was she walks in and then it just cuts to her laying on the floor. So they didn't see what happened in the room. We're seeing what happened, stuff that they didn't see, how she kind of gained those powers. And so Agatha says something along the lines of, oh, it's starting to add up. I have a theory, but I need to see more. So she's trying to put something together, and I would assume the last line of the episode that we will get to, and I'm sure you've already seen, is her theory, her conclusion, putting all these pieces together. So it's interesting to think about with all of this, because all this information is useful for the audience, but trying to think through what's the exact... So did Agatha not know this information until she's had this moment where she's actually picking her brain? That's where I'm also trying to figure out like how Agatha got exactly into the mix on this one, because it makes it clear by the end that Wanda created all of this, but Agatha's there from the first episode, shows up right immediately. So how exactly does that play out, that if Agatha wasn't part of the power that made this happen, how did she get there right from the get-go of the show? And what information did Agatha have prior to this moment? Is this Agatha learning, putting her hypothesis together that leads to what she declares at the end of this episode? Interesting. All that brings us to the next stop on memory lane, Avengers Compound, after, I believe this would probably just be after Age of Ultron, because she's not upset about blowing people up. She's upset about her brother dying. And she's sitting there watching Malcolm in the middle, and she wants company. So she's like, Vision, come on in. And he's clearly still learning how to interact with people and what is and isn't appropriate. So they're sitting there, and, you know, he's trying to understand humor. If Bryan Cranston getting crushed by stuff, which all the universe tying together, Bryan Cranston was in Godzilla. In the movie Godzilla, her husband was played by Aaron Taylor Johnson, Quicksilver, in Age of Ultron. His dad in the movie is Bryan Cranston, so it's like this, the whole universe ties around the movie Godzilla, apparently. But so he's trying to understand humor, watching Bryan Cranston get taken out, and Malcolm in the middle. And it just kind of leads to her kind of talking about just all the, the pain that she's experiencing with all of this and just wanting to feel better. But the only thing that would make her feel better is her brother coming back because she's lost him. And then it leads to this moment where Vision says this super profound little segment about how he's never had anything, so he could never lose anything. So he's never experienced those emotions, but then he makes this profound statement about this love, isn't grief just love persevering? He's part of her process of trying to understand how to move forward with everything that she's lost and all the tragedy that she's experienced. And from there, it takes us to our next little segment. And at this point in time, we show up at S.W.O.R.D headquarters. Wanda walks in. She wants to take Vision's body to bury it. He died. This is the person she loved. Wants to say goodbye. Wants to give him a proper, respectful send-off. So she wants to do that. And eventually, she's allowed to go back. Walks into Hayward's office, not Hayworth, but Hayward's office. There is a difference in pronunciations there. Some people have been saying it wrong. Hayward's office. And she's like, I want to see him. And he's kind of doing the polite deal that he was doing with Monica when the two of them first showed up. And she's like, okay, let's go look at it. And he walks her over, reveals down in this laboratory, Vision's body broken up into these different pieces, cords coming out of it, lasers shooting it, things being cut off. And you have this moment where you see the wildly different ways that each of them perceive a Vision. She sees the person she loves. Hayward sees a machine and a very useful weapon that potentially this weapon would have been really nice to have had during the 5-year apocalypse that he lived through. And there's gigantic disconnection between them. She is watching the person she loves being dismembered. And he sees a potential with her being able to power his new toy. And so they start having this dialogue back and forth where she legitimately showed up for the purpose of wanting to bury Vision's body. And Hayward says this line where he's like, not everyone has the power to bring back their soulmate or bring their soulmate back online, back to life. And he says all these lines, says all these things where you're not sure if he's intentionally being jerkish or if he legitimately is struggling to not talk about it as a machine. And he's trying to be not quite sure which way what they're implying with all of it. But she's like, no, I just came to say goodbye. I don't know what you're talking about. How would I even do what you're talking about? And clearly, Hayward, not Worth, is thinking, what if she can power this guy? What if she can bring my toy online? And don't know how exactly he's trying to work with or what exactly is going on, thinking. But he's like, I can't let you take $3 billion worth of vibranium. I can't let you take the most sophisticated, sentient weapon ever created. You can't have him, but I'll let you say goodbye to him. But through this conversation, seems like he puts just enough of the idea in her head. What if you brought him back? What if you brought him back? She walks out. Oh, and I guess there's an important moment. She walks out and leaves. And with what we're about to see what's going to happen, you have to pause right here on this point. 3-4 episodes back, Hayward, not Hayworth, said she stole his body. He said she stole his body going against his will. And then what we learn here is it seems like that didn't happen. That did not. That was a blatant lie. That body was not stolen. And all this stuff about violating the will, that is exactly what he is doing. The reason he knows the will so well is that he has been blatantly ignoring what it said, doing his own thing. More on that at the very end of this one. And if you skipped the post-credit scene, you missed a pretty important one this week. So she goes outside, gets in her car, pretty upset. And I guess the implication here was that someone was just handing out pamphlets in the parking lot and put a pamphlet through her window. So she picks it up, and it's for Westview. That was my interpretation. I watched the episode twice. that's what happened. So she gets this pamphlet saying like, hey, want to start a new life? Want a new home for you and your loved one to grow old? And that's all she wants in the world. So sees that and goes, I'm going to go there. Which brings us to our last little segment. So Wanda drives to Westview, New Jersey, and drives down the road, and it looks like the town that we've seen several times before. And as she pulls into it, it looks like a normal town. It doesn't look like a sitcom town. It doesn't look super clean. There's leaves everywhere. We see all the side characters from the episodes to this point. They're just sitting at coffee shops, a little bit dirty, a little bit run down. And you drive by all these kind of buildings and sites that we saw. Just normal, not scary, but not looking idyllic. And then she pulls up to this plot of land. It's in her brochure, and there's just a foundation there. And she walks up with her pamphlet and opens it up and says, grow old with your loved one, says something like that. And then she just has this emotional breakdown, falls down, and magics out and just shoots this big, gigantic blast of energy and starts creating the reality that she wants. And so you start to see the house form, and then you see fake Vision being formed in front of her. There's so many implications of this idea. So you see, creates fake Vision. So the Vision that we've seen this whole time is just a creation from her mind. This whole reality is crazy. And so a lot of what happened inside of this field thing was rewritten reality. We've been told that. And you walk in with a bulletproof vest. Now it's a bulletproof dress. Rewritten reality. But then this says she is creating reality. And so what exactly does it mean that she's created a vision? Is it just the vision that she wants him to be? Or is it some idea of not just from her memory of what she's created, but some other sense to it? Like, what exactly does that mean? Because if I create a version of you, it's just based off my perception of you, not the reality of you. So is it just her perception of Vision that she's been encountering with, and therefore her perception is someone that challenged her, therefore he would challenge her as he started to have questions, or in some sense, in the creation of reality, made a copy of the one that she knew in some sense. I don't know. I don't know what it means, but she's made, in this pocket reality, she made herself a new Vision, and I don't know what rules he's following by. I don't know what he exists based off of, what all of that means exactly. And pausing for just a moment before we kind of go to the final segment. Well, I guess we'll get to go, trying to tie together where the last episode ended. What was going on with Vision, flying back, Monica showing up, Quicksilver there. How does that, they don't follow up on any of that, so I'm not quite sure what that means. But we'll get to that in a little bit. So anyway, she creates this reality of this sitcom, and then the world creates, and eventually she's there in the sitcom, he's black and white, she's in color, and then she turns into black and white. Then she transforms into Mary Tyler Moore version of her, and he looks over and, Wanda, welcome home. And they sit down to watch TV. And that's even the act of sitting down to watch TV has a lot more significance now than it did before. Because it was before like, they like to watch TV. This episode establishes that's her escape from reality. That's the thing that she does to cope. So that gesture, that is her way of avoiding even accepting that she's created a reality. So it's a symbolic gesture that means a whole lot more than it would at first glance. And then you start having this clapping, the camera kind of pulls out, and it kind of, now we're in the set for the sitcom being shot. Agatha's in the audience kind of doing a slow clap, and Wanda's kind of realizing everything that's gone on. And I'm curious, what exactly did Wanda create a reality where she herself is rewriting herself in it to herself does not fully know what's going on? She is written into it, and she kind of knows, but kind of doesn't know. And Agatha is just like, this is what you did? Is that what's fully being implied here? That it's showing her the production of all of it? I'm not fully sure on what is being implied with some of this, but Agatha's clapping, and then Wanda starts hearing the screams outside of her children, which leads us into our last little bit. So it closes out with Wanda running outside the house to try and find her kids, and it's revealed Agatha's flying in the air, looking very witch-like with these magic-y things wrapped around the kids, the twins' necks. And Agatha starts putting it all together, explaining all of what's going on. And she's like, I thought that you were a myth. The idea of someone that's capable of spontaneous creation, like that, we didn't think that that was a real thing that was possible. And you're wasting it making breakfast for dinner. And so this is her hypothesis. She's putting all together everything she's learned. So I'm assuming she's learned this stuff for the first time through this episode of this journey that she went on. And I guess she had to pluck the hair out. That's how she got this information to confirm her theories as to what is going on, which also informs the audience as to what is going on. So she says, this is chaos magic. This means you must be the Scarlet Witch. And finally, Wanda gets her comic book name, the Scarlet Witch, which apparently has deep ramifications inside of witch culture, that she is this mythical character. But beyond that, mythical character that can create things spontaneously with Infinity Stone powers. And so we go back to last week's episode. What was our ad? It was about the Nexus, this element inside of the Marvel comics that kind of can tie realities together of sorts. And so in light of that ad, in light of she's the Scarlet Witch, she's using chaos magic, hence why some of this was losing a little bit of control as she was doing it, can create reality spontaneously, very much implying Wanda is very, 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 very special.
The Scarlet Witch.
Beyond what we thought, beyond what witch people thought, there's all these other big implications for who she is. And episode ends. And so right there's a couple of thoughts that I had. Like, I was trying to piece together, like, okay, so this whole episode happened. Where was Monica? Like, was Monica kidnapped by fake Pietro that she was trying to get in the basement, and then fake Pietro kidnapped her? And where wasn't Vision flying back? Isn't that where it ended last week? Is that Vision popped out of his car, it was flying back towards her, and then it ended. And so then the implied timeline is that they're the same time. So she's not able to get there. There's a couple of things that was like with where they ended last week and the kind of these dangling plot lines that you kind of. I understand why the nature of this episode did not lend itself to cutting away to being like, and now Monica's tied in a chair, or why it would be a problem for this episode if Vision showed up and Agatha's like, let me tell you what was happening, and then Vision walks in. That would be a problem. But there were a couple of plot lines. I was like, okay, what happened with that? I kind of need some answers as to why they didn't stop our little monologue from going on here. But actually, our episode was not done yet. There was one more sequence that seems very important for our finale. So we get a post-credit scene, and back at Hayward, not Hayworth's base, he's like, we're ready to go. We got to roll out our weapon. And he says something along the lines of, who knew all we need to turn this thing back on was the original energy source. And looks over, and we've got a very white Vision in a machine, and he turns on for just a moment. And I don't know the comic book origins of White Vision, but it's a reference to comic booky stuff. My very quick search meant that it referred to when Vision had been brought back to life by Hank Pym. And this is not Hank Pym doing this, unless maybe Hank Pym will be making an appearance next week or something like that. But White Vision makes an appearance, setting up that Wanda will be fighting Vision next week in what will almost certainly be a very tragic finale. I'm not expecting this one to be a real happy ending for any of this, because there's not really a scenario here that goes well for people in this particular situation. To give you my closing thoughts, as I mentioned earlier, I'm not quite sure where I fall on this one, because talking through it, there's a lot of cool stuff in there. But there was a lot of stuff that, as I kind of mentioned before at the beginning, it felt like they gave the answer that I could come up with, and some of them I did come up with. Not because I'm clever, but because it was so simplistic. And what is fun on these shows is when you're watching it and I have a theory and they come up with something that's smarter than I would come up with and more satisfying. And when you watch it and you go, okay, that was just she is just Agatha. Okay. Oh, okay, Wanda did just do it. You didn't have to smart me. That's just what you implied. And it wasn't like something more complex. That was very simple. Okay, there we have it. There it is. And so there's the sense in which when you first hear something that doesn't necessarily live up to your expectations, in a certain sense of disappointment as you watch it. But, a week from now, I won't have my initial feeling. So I'm not sure if a week from now I'll feel much better about it or be equally frustrated. I do not know. I'm very excited to see where all of this is going, because it seems like all of this is setting up Phase 4 multiverse, but then some of the threads of multiverse that were set up earlier, they've already cut off. And you're kind of wondering, okay, so what does it mean for this Vision to only exist in this reality? Who is he? Okay, Monica has powers. Where's that going? Okay, we've got White Vision outside. What's going to happen with all of that? I am very interested to see where this ends and where that puts our MCU. I'm also like I'm even though we're 8/9 of the way through the show, I'm still not sure where I'm going to land on it. I keep kind of like, oh, and then there's episodes I'm like, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't, I don't know. The last two have felt underwhelming to me. The first three had a certain awkward, underwhelming, and these two have been a little bit awkward, underwhelming in their own ways. But all of them always have had something that's been intriguing about them. So it makes it complicated. And as I've been saying for quite a while now, I think I need to see the whole thing to really know where I land on it. It's designed very much as this 9-episode story that plays out as kind of one movie. And so trying to evaluate where you fall on it without seeing the end of it, it's like watching 8/9 of a movie, not seeing the end, not having all the answers, and then having to evaluate it. I wouldn't want to do that with a movie, so it's tough to do that with this TV show at the same time. Let me know what you thought down below. Come back next week for my thoughts on all of it. I am planning on ranking the episodes, probably do some other fun rankings with it and stuff like that. All of that starts 1 week from today. Talk to you later.